By the end of the war, men on the far side of the barbed wire had learned to think of themselves as a resource to be used up. It was a rational expectation, shaped by earlier conflicts and by rumors that traveled faster than any official notice. Prisoners of war were a movable mass labor that could be sent wherever hands were short. At rail sidings, along transfer routes, in staging yards, a few fixed phrases circulated. They will send you to the pits, to road repairs, to the marsh, to the cold. Each phrase carried not only a prediction, but a role already accepted in advance to be used. Transport felt like a conveyor. First, a field roundup, disarmament, a cursory search, the entry of a name into a ledger, then trucks to the railhead or straight into a car, trains with rare stops, rations issued at intervals, stretchers for those who could not stand. In such a mechanism, it was hard to see anything but the functional movement of human material. The prisoners themselves used that word, among themselves, material. Even when they were listed by name, sorted by the severity of wounds, stamped onto identity cards, it confirmed only one thing. They were being prepared for use, not recovery. The first signs of another logic appeared quietly. Where a crude, fit, unfit sorting was expected, a different kind of medical filter emerged. Triage. Not merely the ability to work, but urgency of treatment, risk of infection, need for isolation. At staging points, quarantine tents went up, not to punish, but to prevent an epidemic from passing through the whole flow. That did not fit the familiar pattern. Men who had braced for immediate forced labor instead found thermometers, chest x-rays, and doctors asking dry questions and ordering vaccinations. No one promised kindness or sympathy. But inside this procedure there was a system in which a man was the object of a medical decision, not just a unit of labor. In the camps where the trains arrived, intake began not with assignment to work details, but with sanitation, delousing, a simple but structured ration, and an initial examination. The camp infirmary was often organized along Army hospital lines, sorting, dressing stations, wards, physiotherapy, a small dental room, a storeroom of medicines with tracked expiration dates. Doctors and orderlies worked to a schedule and kept logs. For prisoners who expected exploitation, that regularity was strange. The immediate explanation they offered themselves was simple. A healthy man is easier to use. A sick man is a risk. But over time, a broader logic showed through. Even those who could not sensibly be used were treated. Broken joints, pneumonia, chronic wounds that needed weeks of care. Epidemic risk was a factor, certainly, but the care was real, not theatrical. External structures played a role. Parcels from international organizations arrived. Censored correspondence was allowed. Inspectors from neutral countries appeared, asking to see hospital ledgers, lists of the wounded, mortality records. These visits did not turn a camp into a place of comfort, but they forced the system to record what happened to people. Where previously it might have been considered enough to bandage and send a man back to a tool, now it was required to write a diagnosis, put a date on the dressing, schedule the next visit. Medical routine embedded itself as a mandatory layer atop the camp regimen, and that routine gradually changed outcomes. Rations for the weak, and for those in wards, differed from the general issue. For men facing a prolonged course of treatment, additional calories were introduced: milk, grains, sugar, canned meat, sometimes fresh vegetables from nearby farms under local contracts. These supplements were not generosity. They were an investment in recovery. But precisely in that calculation, you could see a line that contradicted the initial expectation of use to the last drop. Recovery is not the strategy one chooses if the aim is simply to squeeze out the remaining strength. Recovery is chosen if the aim is to restore function and, surprisingly, to let go. Simple rehabilitation measures appeared as conditions allowed: gentle joint exercises, massage after long immobility, relearning to walk after a cast was removed, breathing exercises. On paper, this was labeled preparation for light duty, but the trajectory for severe cases drifted elsewhere. After a course of treatment came a review board, and for a portion of men, the recommendation was repatriation. At first, this was spoken of as rumor. Then rumor hardened into fact. Men vanished from the lists, not because they died, but because they were officially moved onward in exchange chains. There was a moral component that is hard to quantify. The camp still had hierarchy, guards, discipline, punishments for violations. But around the infirmary, a zone of different logic formed, functional, cold, but oriented toward the outcome, alive, stable, fit to transport. A different language worked here. Not compel and force, but diagnose and treat. That language gradually altered how the prisoners saw their situation. They still felt like objects inside a system, but the system was no longer only a machine of use. It became a machine in which accounting was kept not only in work hours, but also in recovery norms. Some prisoners did not trust the change. Rationally, they expected a trap. Patch us up, and then push us back into a work gang. Sometimes, that is exactly what happened. But in parallel, another line ran. The severe cases passed through 2 or 3 boards and disappeared from camp life. They disappeared not into an unmarked grave, but into an escort to the station, where sanitary wagons waited. From there onward, through route nodes, to facilities not called camps, but exchange and departure centers. Letters that passed the censor rarely contained detail. But through the neutral phrasing, the main point showed through. A man who had expected to be exhausted to the end found that he was being carefully brought back to a condition fit for travel. There was little sentiment in it. Everything was done through forms, ledgers, signatures, but paperwork did not cancel the outcome. The outcome was that, in a setting where the logic of use seemed the only possible logic, a parallel logic of repair and removal operated. The first stage of the story ended as dryly as it began. A protocol, a list of names, signatures of the camp doctor and the section chief, issue of warm clothing appropriate to the season, a medical certificate, registration of personal effects, boarding a sanitary rail car. Those who left rarely understood what had changed inside the system that had chosen, suddenly, to heal and send men away. But as such departures accumulated, it became obvious. Prisoners were not only used, they were treated and returned. And this was not a lone anomaly, but a new structure of the war's end, a structure in which counting the living and the ready to return slowly displaced the familiar arithmetic of coercion. The shift in logic from exploitation to restoration did not announce itself with slogans. It appeared through routine repeated daily until it became the new normal. A camp day began with medical rounds. Not the cursory kind, where an orderly peeks into a barrack and notes the most obviously feverish, but list-based rounds, with each name followed by yesterday's status, today's orders, and the control date of the next check. The ledger held columns for pain, temperature, weight, and reactions to medication. It looked like a dry bookkeeping of health, but that bookkeeping pulled people from the category write off into the category transfer. The infirmary's internal structure resembled a manual, an intake desk to record complaints, triage to divide cases into streams, a dressing room to handle acute needs, a ward for what required time. Nearby, rudimentary physiotherapy, breathing exercises for lungs damaged by cold and dust, an orthopedic corner with splints, braces, and improvised insoles. Food was handled separately. Those on weight recovery regimens received small, frequent meals, porridge, milk, sometimes an egg, sometimes canned fish. There was no generosity in the menu, only a formula, plus calories, plus protein, plus regularity. The formula slowly returned bodies to baseline numbers and earned a different note in the ledger: fit for transport. Staff worked in the logic of an army system: strict shifts, a quartermaster for the dispensary tracking expiration dates, tight control of dressings and instruments, precise counts of syringes. Such discipline meant the medical wing was not window dressing. It was the center where a decision was made: remain part of a formless mass, or join an organized exit process. Prisoners sensed it in small things: the line for dressings organized by a medic, not a guard; temperatures compared to yesterday's instead of checked for form's sake; a man whose condition worsened moved from a barrack to a heated tent, even if beds had to be reassigned. Alongside this ran a layer visible mostly to those handling paperwork: requests to and from international organizations, reporting templates with columns for mortality, infections, injuries, treatment timelines. Inspectors arrived irregularly, but inevitably, asking not only to see wards and kitchens, but documents. Paper became a second battlefield where the camp proved compliance with minimum norms. Paradoxically, that compliance, sometimes achieved through unpleasant pedantry, created space in which prisoners' health could no longer be treated as secondary. One could not write "conditions satisfactory" if a man's chart showed a week of fever. One could not reassign someone to heavy labor if his card contained an active treatment order and restrictions. The paths to recovery gradually split into 3 tracks. First, reversible conditions leading to light camp duty, kitchen, laundry, clothing repair, low-load maintenance. Second, extended recuperation to reach transport fitness, weight gain, stabilization after severe wounds, relearning to walk after fractures, therapy, prioritized over labor. Third, unconditional medical repatriation, chronic disease in severe form, disabling injuries, tuberculosis, non-remitting consequences of wounds. Each track had its own packet of forms, signatures, and route. The route mattered more than words. It began on paper and ended with a train. For the first group, the loop was closed. Barrack meal point light task evening check. For the second, the loop widened. Barrack ward physiotherapy review board, sanitary railcar. For the third, the chain was faster but stricter. Isolation, special ration, travel preparation, mandatory vaccinations, orderly escort to the station, handover by receipt to the receiving side. Built into every link was the same idea. The aim was not to hold a prisoner inside the system as long as possible, but to move him out if justified by medicine and exchange agreements. Rumors about exchanges and departures, like any rumors, came in 2 tones. One was bitter. They send people away to get rid of them, to improve statistics. The other was pragmatic. They send people away because they treated them for this outcome, because it is cheaper, because late war arithmetic counts the living differently. Over time, the second tone dominated as facts accumulated. Letters that made it through censorship confirmed. People were leaving not into a void, but into exchange centers, and from there onward closer to home or into the custody of another system. The letters were spare and careful, but carried the shift. Subjects of process now included not only the fit, but those recognized as needing return. Rehabilitation was rarely named out loud, but it acted with hands. After a cast came instruction in bearing weight. After pneumonia, short walks, distances increased by schedule. After surgery, gentle exercises to regain range of motion. Discipline stayed strict, yet within discipline appeared consistency of care. If 2 weeks of breathing exercises were ordered, 2 weeks were completed. If gained 2 kilograms before the board was set, the ration was adjusted until the mark was reached. The logic was simple. Hit a control point, then move to the next stage of the route. There were setbacks. colds in drafty barracks, flare-ups of old wounds, seasonal deficiency diseases. The system replied, not with one-off benevolence, but with its own tools: ration correction, vitamins, transfer to warmer quarters, rescheduling activity. Doctors wrote, "Postpone transfer 7 days." The guard office rewrote the dispatch sheet. A train left without one man, but another followed. At the scale of hundreds of names, this looked like an organized flow. At the scale of one life, it looked like what recovery means in harsh settings: not instant, not perfect, but rule-based. External inspections added transparency. Every few weeks, a commission asked to see not the best, but the typical: a pneumonia case, a fracture, a severe infection. Clerks opened ledgers and showed dates: admitted, ordered, performed, transferred, dispatched. If gaps appeared between the lines, they were recorded as violations. Fear of such notations worked better than orders. To avoid them, the process had to be even, and an even process is the foundation of healing in a rough camp environment. Trust remained its own problem. Some prisoners continued to assume they were being prepared for another round of exploitation. But the fact that some men left camps not for work details but for exchange slowly eroded that certainty. As examples accumulated, a new image of a normal ending took shape. It did not resemble cinema. No escape, no miracle rescue, no deed. It looked like a sequence of signatures, stamps, and a seat in a sanitary car. The image did not inspire. It steadied. There was no heroism in it, only planning. Reassessment unfolded on the administration side as well. A prisoner brought to transport fitness and sent onward by exchange signified a system working correctly: epidemic risk minimized, camp load reduced, formal obligations met. They saw not humanitarianism, but efficiency. Yet the effect on people did not change. Those who had expected an endless loop of coercion entered a managed exit trajectory, prosaic, unadorned, but effective. The day's tally in such a system rarely differed from the previous days. A few shifted to light duty, a few admitted to wards, 1 or 2 prepared for dispatch, a new list for vaccinations, fresh weight figures, a batch of letters through the censor. From the outside, it looked monotonous. From the inside, it was a map of departure. A map by which even someone who believed himself condemned to permanent use unexpectedly discovered a stop marked home. Not tomorrow and not at once, but along a route now named not exploitation, but recovery and release. The route home was built not on promises but on linked procedures: medical boards, exchange lists, hub stations, and intermediate centers. It began in the camp infirmary, a board with a doctor, an administrator, and a clerk. Using charts with diagnoses and weight trends, men were sorted into 3 categories: light duty, fit for transport, and medical repatriation. Decisions were signed, and preparation for travel was scheduled. Nutrition, dressings, vaccinations, control x-rays. Next came exchange lists. They were cross-checked repeatedly, card numbers corrected, with notes like vaccination complete, needs warm clothing. Preparation was practical: seasonal clothing and shoes, travel rations, aisle berths for the week, sanitary escorts, certificates recorded vaccinations, and en route recommendations. Dispatch moved through hub stations, brief medical recheck, identity verification, assignment to sanitary or regular cars, with military, medical, and intermediary personnel present. The route was stepped: quarantine and checks at intermediate centers, replenished supplies, short behavior briefings for the journey. Mixed parties severely ill with the stable were pre-segmented. Night watches and ready access to medics, reduced breakdowns, and emergency stops. Exchange points functioned as neutral nodes, Opposing trains met, identities were confirmed by documents and distinguishing marks, joint medical checks were conducted, disputes resolved by additional paperwork, not improvisation. Emotionally, distrust faded through repetition. First the sanitary car, then the first hub, then the next post. Link by link, home shifted from hope to routine. The route ended with a dry statement: fitness confirmed, transport completed, the person removed from the system not by luck, but by the managed logistics of a war's end. The final leg looked routine: crossing the border, intake at repatriation posts, sanitary corridor, brief delousing, repeat exams, entry into national registries. No ceremonies, only forms, x-rays, vaccinations, a health certificate, short quarantine orders, and food coupons. Medical boards assigned outcomes: immediate hospitalization, outpatient monitoring, or fit for work after rest. For the emaciated, catch-up nutrition and physiotherapy. For TB cases and the severely wounded, specialized sanatoria and long inpatient care. Administration was equally cold: identity checks, verification of military status, marks for time in captivity, assignment of temporary residence. Social services issued basic clothing kits, referrals to local doctors, document reissue vouchers, sometimes small payments or food parcels. In parallel came a simple but hard adjustment: relearning the civilian rhythm, sleep schedule, timed meals, no heavy labor for weeks, regular visits to a general practitioner. Myth and rumor gave way to statistics. Reports tracked categories of returnees: en route mortality, average time to household self-sufficiency. At the state level, it read as efficiency: fewer outbreaks, lighter hospital loads, closure of missing person files. At the personal level, it was quiet recovery, without grand words: weight gained, sutures healed, feeling back in fingers, patient breathing exercises. Captivity did not vanish from memory, but it stopped being the only identity. People re-entered routine: medical follow-ups, light work as advised, return to a trade or training, occasional review boards. For the system, the goal was met: living bodies, pulled from the contours of war and returned to the contours of life. For the returnees, the outcome was drier still: treated, cleared, authorized for work, removed from roles. Thus, through forms and procedure, ended a story that began with the expectation of exploitation and finished with managed healing and home.